Friends, at this time we are going to begin our services, so we'll ask everyone to make their way to their seats. If you do have a cell phone or any other noise-making device, if you take a moment now, please, to silence it or turn it off, that would be appreciated. And again, we are beginning our services today for Jeanette Zolkewitz. Officiating our services today is Rabbi Jeffrey Weil.
Adonai, ma adam v'teta'ehu, ben enosh v'techashvehu. O eternal God, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you would even be mindful of us? It's a question that the psalmist posed. What are we? Adam the hevel dama. Every human being is just like a breath, a passing shadow, which comes and goes like grass. And in the morning it shoots up renewed, and in the evening of all of our lives, the grass fades and withers. But God, you cause all of us to return unto dust, saying, Shmor tam urei yashar. Mark the wholehearted. Behold the upright. Friends, we gather this morning to pay tribute to one, remember one, say a final farewell to one who was tam v'yashar. She was wholehearted, and she was upright, and she was caring and generous and loving and strong. Jeanette Zolkewitz. In our scriptures, our sages, our biblical forebears, did something to express, something physical to express the feeling of loss, that something's torn or something's missing in their lives. They did an act of kriya. Kriya means tearing. And we have some of the family members of Jean who are wearing the kriya ribbons right now. In a moment, we'll rise, those who are wearing the ribbons, and we'll recite the blessing. It's a very brief blessing that acknowledges God as the Dayan Ha'emet, the judge of truth. It's an interesting blessing. It acknowledges, even during very, very sad times, acknowledges God as the true judge, the judge of truth, even when at times that we might question that. And so for those who are wearing the ribbons, please rise now, and I'll approach you and we'll recite that blessing. Our scriptures have appropriate passages for every moment in our lives, the times of joy and the times of sadness as well, funerals. And at a time like this, we turn to the 23rd Psalm. It is on our handouts. I'll read it first in Hebrew, and then we could read it together in English. Psalm 23, Mizmor LeDavid. Adonai ro'i lo echzar, binotesha yarbitzeni, al mei minuchot inahaleni nafshi yeshuvev. Yancheni v'magle tzedek l'man shemo. Gam ki elech v'geit salmavet, lo irara ki ata imadi. Shiftecha mishantecha hema yinachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorai, tishanta b'shemen roshi, kosi ravaya. Ach tov v'chesed yutafuni kol yemei chaya, v'shafti b'veit Adonai lo'orech yamim. Together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The third chapter of Ecclesiastes, in Hebrews Kohelet, expresses this idea sort of similar to the blessing that we recited for the Kriya, for the tearing of the ribbons, an idea that that there's a reason somehow for everything in this world. Also very difficult theology, but our tradition guides us or nudges us at least in that direction, that everything under the sun that happens, that there's a time and a place for it. L'kol zman ve'et l'kol chefetz tachat hashamayim. A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for planting and a time for reaping, a time for keeping, a time for discarding, a time for loving, a time for hating, a time for embracing, a time when we must refrain from our embraces, a time for slaying, a time for healing, a time for laughing and a time for weeping, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing, a time for dying, a time to seek, a time to lose, a time to speak, and a time to keep silence. And so we speak, we take advantage of this time together to speak words in memory tribute of Jeanette Zolkewitz, Jean. This is a very important time of year. As I'm sure most of you know, we're nearing the end of the month of Elul, and therefore the end of a Jewish year, 5784. It's been quite a year for the world, for the Jewish world in particular. But for all of us, our sages urged us to take stock at this time, of course, during this month preceding Rosh Hashanah, and not only to contemplate repentance or teshuvah, which is, of course, the main thing, but as part of that, to contemplate and consider our various character traits. The teachers of the Musar movement, said that we should have the right quantity of the right attributes. Those quantities are called midot. Midah is a quantity. And so we have to have the right midot, really qualities in right measure, in order to be a well-rounded human being, to lead worthy lives. And so we think at times like this about our midot, and at a time like this in particular, about Jean's midot, that her qualities, her attributes. It could be instructive, her life, for us at this time. For she possessed, I would say, the basic, just fundamental qualities that our sages most valued and most advised us to pursue. They encourage hard work, avodah. They encourage loyalty to loved ones. They encouraged chovah, which is obligation, fulfilling our obligations. They encourage chesed, kindness. And Jean, possessed all of that and a lot more as well. And so as we enter soon 5785, with a hope that we can change for the better, her example is worth considering. She was the second child of immigrant parents, Carl and Rose. Her sister Sarah was 8 years older. Her younger brother Larry was 8 years younger. The family lived on the west side at 13th and Central Park. Is that right? It was a traditional Jewish life for them. Carl was a cap maker on Maxwell Street. He attended shul each morning. Yiddish was spoken at home. Feels like very traditional, kind of a throwback to a different time and certainly a different place. Jeanette was a generous person, even as a child. She allowed her little brother Larry to tag along with her and her friends. Not all older sisters are enthusiastic about that sort of thing, but she did. She later, when she was older, they shared a car, another example of her generosity. Jean went to Marshall High School, and then she got to work. She went to work, and she was very, very deeply devoted to her career. She entered the field of commercial collections, and she moved up into management positions at Dun & Bradstreet and Chicago Midwest. And in her capacity as an expert in this field, she traveled the country speaking at seminars. She was recognized with awards for her expertise. And certainly goes without saying, but I'll say it, it's very unusual and very impressive for a woman of that generation. She was a pioneer. She broke the proverbial glass ceiling, excelling in a business dominated by men. Some people who are so intensely focused on one aspect of their lives, in this case career, might relegate other aspects of their lives to a secondary status, and this was not the case with Jeanette Zolkewitz. She prioritized relationships as well, big time, her family and her friends, no less than she prioritized work. When, for instance, when her parents, Carl and Rose, were older and in need of attention, it was Jean who stepped forward. And by doing so, of course, she benefited her parents. They needed her at that time. She also was benefiting her siblings, Sarah and Larry, and their families. Her generosity with her time and her attention to her parents at those critical times allowed them to focus on their lives, raising their families, and so forth. Jean was always close to family. She was a devoted sister and sister-in-law to Dave and to Sheila. She was a cherished and devoted aunt to Maury and Bonnie, their memories for blessing, and to Jean, and to Carol and Michael, Julie and Lori, and their families, significant others and children, and so forth. And she got to see the family, especially the local family, a lot over the years. It's good to have an aunt like Aunt Jean. It's also good to have a friend like her. She had many dear friends, including Patty Moore, a dear friend for many, many decades. And Jean and her friends, her lady friends, as you told me, they would travel domestically, including to Hawaii and Alaska, and elsewhere. She also made the trip to Japan for a bar mitzvah. And there was more to her, to this dynamic person. She was a very big reader, romance novels. She played poker. She played Scrabble. She played Yiddish Scrabble, for she had joined a Yiddish club, refamiliarizing herself with the language that she had heard at home many decades earlier. When her sister died, when Sarah died, Jeanette stepped forward. She became a sort of surrogate mother. She generously made herself available. And nephew Jean, said that his Aunt Jean was there for him if he ever just needed to talk or whatever, pick up the phone and talk. They certainly did. Over the years, she was a reliable, dedicated, enthusiastic user of the telephone. It used to be that she would talk to Larry and to Jean a few times a week. More recent years, every day. There was a schedule. Jean called his aunt at 3 o'clock, and Larry called his sister from California at, I think, 7 and then 6:30, and Jean looked forward to these check-ins. She expected them, and if a helper or a friend came in at the wrong time, they would have to wait. The calls came first. When you talk daily, you might run out of things to say. What's new, after all, from yesterday at the same time? That's what meals are for. So what did you have for breakfast? What did you eat for lunch? This is what Jews talk about when there's nothing else to talk about. But they're good check-ins. Jean's loved ones, they told me, are very grateful for the support of Connie, her caregiver for the last couple of years. They're also grateful to Jean's geriatric coordinator and advocate, Eileen Eliasoff, who commented to me that about Jean's strength, both physical strength and otherwise strength, that she was a strong woman. Our sages taught something. They're always teaching things that were so simple and wise at the same time. They said, simchu, rejoice at a time of rejoicing, and mourn at a time of mourning. It just seems so obvious, but it's really true. But there's something like, why did they put those two things together, we ask? Well, this is a time for mourning. It's a time for sadness. She lived a long life, and she lived a good life, it is true, but she's gone. There's a loss there. And so you've lost someone special to you, someone who's been integral to your lives for a long time, for many of you, for your entire lives. So there's a hole, there's a loss there. But may there also be space in your minds and your hearts for the rejoicing, even amid the sadness. For Jeanette Zolkewitz, yes, led a long life, and more importantly, a good life, an admirable life. She was caring of you, generous to you. She was driven and successful in her career in a way that was pioneering, unusual for a woman of her generation. She stepped forward when she was needed and that was required, and she was always steadfastly loyal. She was generous. She was a good friend. And so as we prepare for this most important time of year, may her life, the life of Jean Zolkewitz, serve as a good dugma, as a good example for all of us. And Zichrona Livracha, may her memory be for blessing. Amen. It's my pleasure to call forward some of Jean's loved ones to speak. Begin with her brother Larry.
First of all, thank you all for coming and sharing Jean's soul passing on to heaven. And the rabbi eloquently spoke about her life, and I would like to share a letter that I wrote to her several years ago, which kind of covers many of her qualities and loving points. It started out as, "Dear Jean, after talking to you these last few days, I knew it was time for me to tell you all the love I have for you and how much I appreciate what you have done to me and our family throughout my lifetime. There are so many things I want to say about our relationship that I do not quite know how to put into words, but I'm going to try. I will start by thanking you for making me feel included as we were growing up. I know it was not the coolest thing to bring your little brother everywhere, and you probably were not happy about that at the time. But I really appreciate you making the time for me, even when you'd rather have been with your friends. Some of the other personal things you did for me, among other things, include sharing your first car with me and giving me the Chevy Bel Air when I came back from Germany and left for California. Loaning me money to buy a car after my divorce and eventually writing off the balance. The generous gifts of money you gave our family over the years, including Caden. Most of all, giving of yourself. I realize more than ever how much of your own life you gave up to take care of Ma and Pa, and especially in their later years. I know I was not much help. I was too busy raising my own family. So for this, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Jean, I feel this sadness too of us not being closer and not being able to spend time together as in the winter of our lives. But please know that although we are separated by miles, you are always close to me in my heart. I love and miss you, sister, more than ever now. Thank you.
Very beautiful, Larry. Thank you so much. Thank you. Nephew Jean, thank you.
Some of you may have heard my name over the years. Jeanette was my best friend before I met my wife. I want to highlight some of the things that many of you don't know about my aunt. Many trips that she made to Springfield or wherever we lived. We always took in a movie. We always went out to eat. It was a fun time. She used to bring us bagels, bialys, cream cheese, and mandel bread. One morning, we got up, and Jeanette says, "Who ate the mandel bread last night?" And I said, "I did." I said, "How did you know that?" She said, "I counted them before I went to bed." My aunt was always a joy to be around. We had such great times. She's very generous to our family. All my friends and many people she met, they started calling her Aunt Jean. It was just an automatic name that came. It wasn't Jeanette, it was Aunt J. She retired 2 times and almost had a 3rd retirement. She was very dedicated to working. My calls to her and Larry every day since 2019, and the rabbi told you it was an everyday call. It was her lifeline to her family. Some conversations were long, some were not. But it was something that Larry and I had to dedicate to her to help her get through what happened when she had to finally go into a retirement-type community. I remember her sitting in our lanai in Florida reading a book. The rabbi said she liked to read romance novels. She would always tell me I finish a book in 2 hours. And I said, "How did you do that?" And she said, "I don't read the entire book. I read what I want to read." That was my aunt. You know, we thought, oh, she's really a fast speed reader. I don't know if you all remember the series Nip Tuck. It was a plastic surgeon, Los Angeles, had a lot of things going on there. My aunt come to Springfield and she said, "Have you ever watched Nip Tuck?" And I said, "No." I said, "What is it?" "We're going downstairs, we're gonna watch it." My wife Sharon said, "I'm staying up here. I have no desire to see this." My aunt and I went through so many episodes of Nip Tuck to the point where I bought the videos just so when she would come, we could pop it in there. These are memories that, you know, you can't not think about. Her driving. How many times I can tell you that she ran over concrete bumpers, she backed into walls. When she would bring her car to Springfield, we'd look at it and we'd say to her, "What happened?" "Oh, nothing, nothing." That was my aunt. Another thing that we remember, the family was always connected. She made sure we were connected. She was adamant about it. Always proud to show off her nephews, nieces, and the great nephews and nieces. She'd always introduce them to people that we visited. So my belief is when my mother died, her sister, my aunt took on a dual role. I was her nephew, but she became my mother. And I don't mean mothering in a suffering way. I think it was like a support mechanism for me. And I'll never forget all the phone calls and everything she would tell me to do and not tell me to do. But I always honored what she was trying to bring to my attention. Now, many of you probably think you know Jeanette, but I want to talk about a couple things. And again, I'm trying to show the lighter side of her because a lot of you didn't know some of the things that she did. You didn't know Jeanette if you haven't been in a car with her and went to Chinatown, and instead of making a right or left, she makes a U-turn on the main drive. Cars are honking at her, cars are yelling at her. She didn't care. That was my aunt. If you didn't know her 3 famous words, they were cuckoo, jerk-ass, and the S word that ended with a T. That were the 3 words my aunt would always use in her vocabulary. If you didn't go to the finest restaurants, and especially Carson's, you didn't know my aunt. She knew every place to take you, and she was a very generous person when it came to taking people to dinner. If she called you, she would always say her phone wasn't working. She literally called you and still felt that you had a problem with the phone. Larry and I went through this many, many times with her. So what I was gonna do, to make it short and simple, I wanna tell you about Jeanette, my aunt, from A to Z. A, she was ambitious. B, she was beautiful. C, she was courageous. D, she was determined. E, experienced. F, funny. G, generous. H, hilarious. I, icon. J, joyous. K, kind. L, loving. M, matriarch of the family. N, no one was a stranger. O, outstanding. P, personal. Q, quality plus. R, rewarding. S, sassy. T, temper. U, unstoppable. V, vivacious. And of course, we end with Z. She was Jeanette Zolkewitz. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you being here. Please cherish my aunt. Always remember her. She was the matrix of our family. She was my aunt, my hero, became my best friend. May she rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you so much. Nephew Michael.
So I know this room is incredibly rich with stories. And over the last few days, I was able to hear a lot of those stories, and I look forward to all the other stories that all of you hold and share about my Aunt Jeanette. She touched us all in such an incredible way. And I think all of us being here is just a testament to the legacy that she leaves, and also how much that she loved us all. I'm glad Jean brought up the matriarch. Aunt Jeanette was the matriarch of the Zolkewitz family. And when I say matriarch, it means she was almost sometimes the glue that held us together. She made sure we talked to each other. She made sure she would say, "Did I call my dad?" She was always there at every event. She wouldn't miss any birthday parties. Oh, Aunt Jeanette loved birthday parties. And she was there. She was a very special person, as you all know. She was extremely generous, and generous in the sense that she was very kind to people. When some of my greatest memories of her are those eating out to dinner and taking us out. And not only was she, of course, just generous in doing that, she was generous to everybody out there. When we walked into restaurants, she knew everybody who worked there. She was kind to everybody that worked there. She walked in with this energy and this strength and this great light that shined from her. Cuckoo, I'll never forget growing up. I thought when I was a kid that was the funniest thing, when she would just say everything's cuckoo. She didn't use the bad language around me that well. No, she did. She never said no to a good time. I mean, she didn't balk at going to Japan and going to the bar mitzvah in Japan. When we asked her to babysit our kids, she's like, "What?" But she did. And we said it's only an hour, and we left her for 6. And when we came home, she's on the floor playing with our boys. You know, she was always there for all of us. And she always had time for us. And I remember she was a good mentor and a good advisor, and the best advice was, "So you'll do what you decide." I have a good friend that lost their son, and I said to her, "What was your son like?" And she said, "Well, I won't tell you what my son was like. I'll tell you, how he is." Because it was a reminder that while we lost Aunt Jay in a certain way, we carry her memory always now. So she's always with us. She will always be with us. Our memories are real. Our memories are here now, and I will always carry Aunt Jeanette's memory always in my heart. She'll always be in my heart, and she'll be with me every single day.
Thank you. Beautiful tribute, Michael. And niece Carol.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I know this is going to be hard for me. I am so humbled and so incredibly proud to be a Zolkewitz woman. Aunt Jeanette emanated that. There's just a strength and fierceness about her. There's 3 words that come to my mind that I'll touch on: influence, independence, and spirit. Influence, I think, as we've talked about, and again, stories we've shared, she was a woman that touched everybody, and not only touched them with stories, but impacted people in many ways, whether it was an advisor, whether it was supporting, whether it was loving, whether it was giving. The incredible influence is astounding. And I think, again, stories we have shared, one of the things with influence is she was such a spearheaded a path for women and determination. And I looked up to her as a guide in my own pathways to my career. And she was always the one that rose to the top because I was able to have the strength and feeling I felt was her. And my career path led to parallelism, and it was always a pride that she had, and it was always because seeing the determination that she had. The other thing, independence, and I think we can all say she was an incredibly independent woman, and to the core. And her ability to be free in that aspect and do the things she wanted and make the decisions she wanted, it was such a genuine quality of hers. And it's hard in the last 4 or 5 years to see that piece change, as it does. Life is a cycle. But beautiful that we could see how much of that freedom that she had. She traveled. She didn't let anything stop her. I mean, I think she, again, with that determination. You know, how do you go forward when you lose loved ones that you have on earth and cherish, and we have those memories? But I think that spirit, especially the last couple of weeks, is just looking around and finding all those memories that, whether it's driving around, I came to Chicago at least once a year, and just as I drove around, everything is like, oh, she showed me this, she showed me that, and her spirit is everywhere, just in flying here, and the signs that people that are out there. So look to those signs, because those are going to be her way of communicating and telling us that I'm flying free and I'm independent again, which gives me comfort knowing that she has that. And everything that is a reminder of her, I know will spark that with me. So please take that with you. And Aunt Jay made such an impact and will always carry that with me. So I'm going to miss her, but I am comforted in knowing that I have that and those stories with me. Okay, thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Carol. and sister-in-law Sheila.
Larry and I are fifth-year Musar students. We graduated and are going on to an additional. I want to say how grateful that I am for all of you for coming. And this isn't a speech like everybody else's, but I think I'm going to be speaking for Jeanette. But before I do that, I want to say to Jeanette, because of this time of year, for any hurt that I gave you, I'm sorry. I loved you, and I wish you, I told you, I feel Jeanette's going to be meeting Carl and Rosie and Bonnie and Maury and her Aunt Zeldy. They're all waiting for her. But what I wanted to say was speak to you, Jean, and my husband, as I consider you guys gentlemen, with the emphasis on the adjective gentle. And these guys, her boys, were by her side continuously, calling whoever they needed to call, whether it was the nurse's desk or the head of Lincolnwood or whatever, and the daily phone calls. Your aunt, your sister, very proud of you at this moment, and very proud of the speeches that you made. And I love you, and I wanted you both to know how much I admire you, and I know that she admires you. And be strong with that in your heart. Be happy with what you did for her. You were wonderful. And you'll miss her, but feel the love. And thank you again for coming.
Thank you all for your just very touching, eloquent, moving tributes. Leida hi reshit, uftira tachlit hachaim kemasahem, kahalicha k'tzmicha meshalav l'shalav. The Hebrew poem, birth is a beginning, death a destination, life a journey, a going and a growing from stage to stage. And now the life journey of Jeanette Zolkewitz has reached its conclusion. We now please rise for the final prayer of this service, the El Malei Rachamim, the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Amatzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, B'malot Kedoshim B'torim, Kezoha Harakia Masirim, Et Nishmat Yekara Shalanu Shalchala Olamo, Began Eden Tehei Menuchatam, Arabaha Rachamim Hasireha, Beset Kenafecha Olamim, Utzor B'tzor HaChaim Et Nishmatam, Adonai Chunachalatam, B'tanua B'shalom Al Mishkavam, B'nomar, Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure who glow like the light of the heavens, unto the soul of Jeanette Zolkewitz, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace, and we say, Amen. You may be seated.
Friends, this concludes this portion of the service. The interment will continue at Waldheim Cemetery in Forest Park. I would ask that any of you who are joining us in procession to the cemetery today, please make sure that you obtain an orange funeral safety sticker to place on the passenger side of your front windshield. Please make sure that you're following the cars in front of you as closely as possible especially as we make our way through intersections to avoid any gaps in the procession. And please make sure your bright headlights and your hazard lights are on at all times during the procession. Upon return from the cemetery, the family will be together at Maggiano's Little Italy. That's 4999 Old Orchard Court, Suite A28, just located in Old Orchard Mall. And again, that's today from about 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. All are welcome to join. And that information is available inside the folders you received today as you arrived. They're also available on our website for those of you joining us online. At this time, I'll ask everyone to please rise and ask any of the nieces and nephews who would like to participate as pallbearers, if you would step forward at this time as we escort the family, Jeanette, and the clergy from the chapel.